Hey, rookies, and welcome back to the Rookie Farmer Podcast. This is the home of all things small scale agriculture and market gardening. If you are new here, I'm your host. My name is Alex Smith, and I'm the grower here at Crop Culture Farm in New Bern, Georgia. And as always, with these vlog episodes, we're joined by Richard with Sun and Soil Farm. Hey, Richard, man, how you doing?
Good, good. Yeah, I know we got a lot to talk about today.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. We were hoping that these vlog episodes would end up being monthly, and they're kind of turning into once every month and some change. So gives us a little bit more time to get more topics together. And we've had one hell of a sort of late winter coming into spring. So we definitely want to get into that. But before we dive too much into that, just right up here at the top, I just wanted to remind everybody that, we believe in value for value. So if you are being educated, encouraged, inspired by the content that we're putting out here on the podcast, please consider kicking some of that value back our way in the form of a donation. As you can see behind me, we're in a new space. I'm now podcasting from the farm instead of from my bedroom. And so I don't have to tell my kids to be quiet. My wife doesn't have to go to the other end of the house. You can do all that. And that costs some extra money to put in the internet here and all that sort of stuff. So this podcast does cost some money to do. And every little bit that you guys contribute would be greatly appreciated. And I would like to thank Savannah from Love Equals Farm for donating this month. Like I said, $5, $10, $100, every little bit helps, and helps us just make the show better. We can get better cameras. We can pay for Richard to get better internet so that the rodents don't chew through it, which is what happened last time. Hopefully our editors made it all sound really wonderful and smooth, and no one noticed the massive, huge breaks in the episode.
Yeah, I don't
But
think we can do anything about that.
yeah, there's not a whole lot we could do. That's just Mother Nature at her finest. But with that all being said, let's dive into kind of what's going on the farm. So for context, we're recording this February 19th, so we're very much still in winter. And at least for those of us here in the Southeast and really all across the South, we've endured like one heck of a several weeks of like really crazy winter weather that we normally don't have. Richard, I don't know about you, but down here in Georgia, we like if we get one snow a year, it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, we typically get one snow every year, but even then it's like an inch or two and it's melting the next day by like the middle of the afternoon. So yeah, this one's been a wild one with two like back-to-back weekends of storms, one with ice and snow, and definitely the longest we've seen snow on the ground since we've lived here for like 10 years.
Yeah, I think in the 10 years or so that I've lived down here, yeah, it was like we had snow one year and then no snow for like 4 or 5, and then you'd get like a flurry or two, or yeah, an inch, and that would be it. And I think yeah, we got snow and ice like 3 times in the span of a month,
hmm
and it's just one of those things where like you try and prepare for it. You try to prepare for potentially bad winter weather, but generally you kind of know what to expect. Like, like, we might get a little bit of snow. We're probably going to get a couple of nights in the low 20s into the teens, maybe one really, really cold night. But other than that, like, we're going to be pretty much, below freezing at night, warm up during the day. Everything will be really good. But yeah, but what between the ice, like that was a whole other can of worms of that was less about like, are the plants going to survive? And it was more of like, are the
Yeah.
greenhouses, are the structures, is everything going to be able to handle? I think for us, they were calling for like half an inch to 3/4 of an inch of ice. What were they calling for you guys?
Yeah, they were all we got pretty prepared because they were calling for like over an inch of ice,
Yeah.
which I mean a quarter inch can be pretty nasty. So we ended up with like yeah, a little over a quarter inch. I went out a couple times to check on the greenhouse, and one of our the little bit bigger one we had was like a cattle panel one, and it was sagging a little bit, but I went in there and it looked like it was all right. And by the next day, I couldn't even open the doors on the greenhouse; they were frozen shut. So the ice wasn't horrible, but it definitely like shut stuff down. And then the snow the next week, nothing really melted, and then the snow on top of the ice was just I was knocking off snow on the greenhouses a couple times that night. So yeah, it was nasty.
Yeah. It's moments like this, like, through that whole situation, I was constantly thinking, like, "Man, Richard is so smart for not going full gung ho into wintertime."
Yeah,
Because even, like, I mean, obviously, it sets stuff back and it messes everything up,
yeah,
timing wise, but, I'm freaking out because it's like I've got a farmer's market in 4 days and I have to keep all this kale and these collards and broccoli and everything alive. And, I don't know if I can, if we're going to get, 4 inches of snow and then it's maybe going to melt and then we're immediately going to drop into the teens and we're going to be below freezing for like 3, 4 days. And obviously people up north who are listening to this are like, that's hilarious that you guys
yeah,
are
yeah.
complaining about 4 inches of snow. But, like, our plants are not as well acclimated to that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
We grow a lot outside because we do typically have relatively mild winters. I mean, you're basically exclusively growing outside.
Yeah,
And so, it can be a real challenge to sort of take the seemingly unexpected winter weather that can come up. Like, I can deal with high winds pretty well. Our greenhouses are braced. Things can get weighed down with sandbags. We can deal with torrential downpours pretty well. We can deal with super hot days. All that sort of stuff, like our normal intense weather situations are usually pretty well to mitigate. But when it comes to snow and ice and like really cold temperatures, it's just one of those things that makes it really difficult when you're still trying to hit a weekly farmers market every single week through all of that chaos.
yeah, yeah. We ended up getting, I think it was like 8 or 9 inches on top of that ice that never even melted. So
It's wild.
we definitely weren't stressed about like anything outside. All the kale and collards are alive. We usually just leave those in and just see what happens. They are alive. They don't look great, but we got a little rain the other day and they perked back up. And but we're definitely not. It was nice to just get shut in and not have to like think about when we need a harvest or how to keep things alive because anything under row covers would have just collapsed anyway. So
Yeah, yeah, and it's the one of the joys of 4 season farming, I guess, is
yeah,
kind of rolling with the punches. And I'd be curious, as time progresses and it just seems like our weather is getting like more and more unstable,
yeah,
whether it's just natural cycles or it's human intervention with climate change and all that sort of stuff. I'm That's way above my pay grade to make a determination on what all that is, but
yeah,
it clearly it you'd have to be blind to not realize that, like, there is crazy instability, like, in our climate and our weather right now, and it can make our job pretty difficult.
yeah, yeah. I know it's always hard for in the moment to like recall previous years, but in unstable is definitely like a instability is a good word to put on that because it definitely it gets really hot, it gets really cold. That kind of happens all the time. But like these fluctuations, just like 5 degrees and then 70 like 2 weeks later is that is just as bad as like some of those like harsh heat or cold. So it's definitely getting a little harder to like, you know, guess what to do because you have no idea when those big fluctuations are going to happen.
Yeah, because in a lot of ways, we're kind of coming into that, like, shoulder season.
Hmm.
We have probably, almost right at a month before the vernal equinox, so, we're
Hmm.
definitely still in winter, but it seems like more and more that these crazy warm spells are coming sooner, cold snaps are coming later. I mean, yeah, like you said, it was in the teens just several weeks ago, and now it was 77 here today. We're gonna be in the 70s for the next couple days, and then Monday, Tuesday of next week, it'll be back into the 20s at night, and,
Hmm.
um, I'd be really curious to kind of observe and take notes on how the plants survive or how they sort of deal with some of that stuff.
Hmm.
Especially some of the things like the kale and the chard and some of those like biennial plants that typically we usually would anticipate those things going to flower sometimes probably like April, maybe May.
Yeah, yeah.
And, I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing stuff shoot up and start going to flower, in the next couple of weeks to the next month, just because it's been crazy cold and then hot, and then it's going to get cold again and it's going to get hot again. And yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, we lost an entire bed of bok choy that I thought was like, we have plenty of time. It'll be nice and temperate. We'll be able to get a decent crop of that. And we were able to salvage one bed, and we kind
Mhm.
of harvested a bunch of it right as it was kind of starting to bolt. And
Mhm.
then over the last couple of weeks, we've been selling like sprouting bok choy.
Yeah, yeah.
And, but then I have another bed that was like probably supposed to be ready to harvest this week. And I mean, it's completely gone to flower. I mean,
Yeah.
and they started bolting when they were, a couple inches tall, like 6 true leaves. And so it'll be a nice cover crop, but it's just one of the challenges of beautiful shoulder season that we're in right now.
Yeah. That is the reason that we plant bok choy the way we do. We used to do 3 rows across the bed, but now we do 4 just for that reason. If it looks like they're gonna start bolting, usually they're big enough, we can bunch like 2 or 3 together. And then if we don't get those crazy fluctuations and they go to a full head, then we could just sell the single heads. So we kinda just, like, expect that kinda stuff, especially with bok choy like that.
Yeah. And but obviously with this kind of shoulder season time that we're in, even though we're a month away from spring really officially starting, for all intents and purposes, spring has pretty much started here on the
Mhm.
farm. I mean, we are like full blown. We're not like filling up every bed and transplanting. We're doing a little bit of that, kind of some of the more cold tolerant stuff that, that'll be really quick, our spinaches and some stuff like that. We're go ahead and getting in the ground outside now. I mean, well, yeah, I mean, our seed house is full of tomatoes, it's full of peppers, eggplant, another succession of cabbage and broccoli and kale and collards and all that sort of stuff. And then, um, our lettuces and everything. I mean, we're bursting at the seams with transplants that over the next kind of 2 to 3 weeks will start getting ready to go outside or even be planted into the tunnels. And I think that's one of the things that if you've been doing this for a little while, you like, your rhythms, what the crop
Mhm.
plan says. But I think a lot of times people don't think about the fact that, we're generally like 2 or 3 months ahead,
Mhm.
whenever spring starts, we're not like, all right, now it's spring, now we can start planting.
Yeah, yeah.
We're planting and we're rocking and rolling right now.
Yeah, we just started planting this week, and we have the 2 small greenhouses. The one is pretty much full already, and then the other one kinda just starts getting all the overflow of stuff ready to be planted. But yeah, we planted our first cauliflower today and then all of our carrots this week. And then since we don't grow any peppers or tomatoes in greenhouses, we haven't even started any of that. But we are what, week 6 or 7, I think, for like our seedling starting. And yeah, our greenhouse is pretty full and we're ready. With taking the winter off, we're ready to get started. We're itching to get back out there.
Yeah, and it's like the days are getting a little bit longer.
Mhm.
I'm getting like a good solid extra hour and a half, probably almost close to 2 hours at this point of work in most days, which is really great. You just feel warmer weather, and obviously we're kind of in this like fall spring right now. So you
Yeah.
combine that with just longer days, and it's just you can just like feel this like renewed sense of energy coming back, this renewed drive to just like, yeah, we're prepping beds, we're getting them ready, and just so that once everything is ready to start getting planted, hopefully next week after this cold snap, we'll be just like, yeah, like furiously getting all of our spring brassicas planted so that we'll be, hopefully those things will be ready, month and a half, 2 months from now, so that we don't have a massive gap. Like we're already sort of feeling a little bit of that gap where most everything that got planted through the winter, or it maybe got planted in the fall and it's pretty much done now.
Mhm.
Some of the obviously the kale and stuff is holding over, but like I said, that'll probably start going to flower soon, and there's not really much more that you can pick other than kale florets. But uh, we're definitely sort of feeling that like hunger gap February time of like, ooh, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel. We're having to get a little creative with stuff to make sure that we can show up to market with a decent offering.
Yeah, yeah, we always feel that this time of year, but we have tulips. Tulips are coming up. We might have those in a couple weeks, and then we do some of the daffodils too. But we always we do the compost service, so we start going back to the market every week. We didn't go last week, but now we're back every week, and it always kind of is a little deflating sitting there with nothing on our table. We're like, we're gonna have stuff soon, I swear. Some of the other farms will have some stuff, but like I think our market is really great. I think people really know that seasonality of it. So we just got to get through another month or so, and then we'll probably start having some stuff.
Yeah, and that I mean, that is the one nice thing about this time of year. It's people are so, I mean, literally hungry for
Mhm.
fresh produce that, I mean, they'll buy anything. I mean, like I thought, so we had a big pile of sprouting bok choy on the table and just like, oh, let's just kind of put it on the side. I'm not super proud of it. I mean, it looks great other than the fact that it's, like a foot and a half long and it's got all these little baby bok choys kind of
Yeah,
sprouting
yeah.
off of it all, and but sure enough, it's like I think one person all day on Saturday asked us like, "What is this?"
Mhm.
And you tell them like, "Okay," and they buy it, but other people, they're just like, "This bok choy?" I'm like, "Yeah," and like, "Awesome," and they'll buy 2 of them, and so it's the nice thing is that this time of year, people are just so eager for anything fresh. Our microgreen sales have shot back up
Nice.
surprisingly. Yeah, selling more kale than we've ever sold, and, I think we're typically it would take us 2 hours to sell maybe 20 bunches of kale, and we're doing like 20, 25 bunches in like 30 minutes. Everyone's like, "I want 2 of them. Like, let me just get whatever I
Mhm.
can get." And so that's been the nice thing about this is like, we endured some cold weather. It's starting to warm up a little bit. Days are getting a little bit longer and like people are ready to go. Like
Mhm.
they're sort of feeling the seasonal change and they're sort of responding to that at the market wise as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we
Um,
always I'm waiting for the inevitable, like, when are you gonna have peppers and tomatoes?" It's like,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
about
we've already
2
been getting
months."
that. Like, "Oh, do you have watermelons yet?" It's like, "No, man." Like, no one's
Yeah,
gonna have
yeah.
watermelons for a long time, but,
Haven't even thought about
I mean,
germinating those yet.
yeah, 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 for sure. Um, and so kind of with that, like, what are sort of the main focuses for you in this sort of kind of I don't wanna call it fall spring because I mean,
Mhm.
we're planning for that, but, like, as we're in that kind of shoulder time between the seasons, like, what is the main focus of you and Brittany on the farm? Like, is it just seed propagation? We gotta get our transplants done, we gotta get our seeding done, um, and just sort of ramping production back up?
So our main thing this last week and this week is our big, like, this is when we start, like, really planting stuff. So this week was all of our carrots, and then, before we really start, like, planting every single week and, like, really getting back into it, we kind of focus on making sure, like, our fence is clear, like, around the edges, so we're not messing with that during the season. Uh, we scrape the paths and add new wood chips. We usually try to do that around this time to, uh, try to get all the, like, anything that's not, like, exclusively bed prep, like, try to get all that out of the way just so, like, when it's ready to plant, we just have to prep a bed and plant it. We're not trying to, like, weed any paths or, like, try to clean anything up. So we've been doing that the last month, just making sure everything's put away, things are as ready as we can. I just broke my rake, so now I gotta find a new rake. My favorite rake just broke the other day. Uh, and yeah, like, getting tools ready. We just got the Jang, so I spent all day Tuesday seeding carrots and trying to mess with that.
Oh, yeah, tell me about that.
Feel
So,
pretty good
now that
about
you've
that.
kinda got to run with it a little bit, it's like
Yeah.
from your perspective, obviously, you've only used it, like, one time, but sort of, like,
Mhm.
pros, cons, like, give me the rundown of your initial thoughts on using
Yeah,
it.
so the first, what was right before that snowstorm, we didn't know the snow was coming or the ice. So I just went out there. It was like January, it's like 15th or 17th. I wrote it down. So I just went out and we had an empty bed. I just ran it through just to see how it worked. We had some old seed. So I did that. Everything, it was great. That took like 5 minutes. Uh, And then all the snow and ice came, and I was like, well, I guess I'll never know if those are going to germinate because they were under ice and snow for real, like 20 days, 30 days. Just
Wow.
like I couldn't even see the row. We seed them, put row cover on to keep the soil wet. Couldn't even see the row cover for like 2 weeks. So yesterday I went over there and they're starting to germinate. So that was just like messing around with it, just trying to get a feel for it. And so I feel pretty confident. I planted 200 feet of carrots. I was here by myself, so I did that in, I don't know, 4 hours, prepped 200 feet of beds, broad forked them, fertilized them, and seeded them in about 4 hours, which is pretty good for me for a first time with a Jang and for that many carrot beds.
Yeah, and typically 200 feet of carrots, like, what would that have taken you to direct seed by hand previously?
Most of our beds are 25 feet. So I would say from like to have to prep and broad fork a bed and seed it, probably like an hour to the hand seed it
Yeah,
at best. So this was the equivalent of 8 of those beds in about half the time. So
that's awesome.
yeah, much better. I'm sure I'll get faster at it because I was constantly like kind of slowing down and like looking to see the seeds dropping out and make sure because we've had issues before with germination and we always knew that like the shallower for the carrot the better. They just they start germinating sooner and you can just like you just get in they just always seem to germinate when there's like just a thinner layer and it always seemed like anytime we've like seen a cedar, it just seemed like it was like planting them too deep. So that was the only thing I was really worried about. So that probably slowed me down trying to mess with like the shoe height and stuff and making sure that everything was like getting seated at the depth we wanted. But yeah, it was great.
And and that's for better or for worse, I think that's one of the real benefits of the Jang is how precise you can get things.
Yeah.
So, whether it's like the gear ratios to get like your perfect drop, or using the right size roller,
Mhm.
which, within reason, you can kind of be like, all right, the chart says you use the X roller for this crop or whatever. But inevitably it's like, okay, well, these radish seeds are smaller than like a regular standard radish. So then you're
Yeah. Yeah.
you're sort of like trying to dial it in perfectly. You've got the brush height, you've got the height of the shoe. There's so many different um like parts of this that can be dialed in specifically for like each particular crop. And if I remember correctly, I want to say that Jody Roebuck, um,
Mhm.
he I don't know if it's individual hoppers, but I think for like his different crop types, like he has his rollers and his brushes like dialed in exactly where they need to be.
Mhm.
So it's just like he swaps out an entire hopper and puts it on for each particular one so that it's
Okay.
like precisely, can like they weigh the seed before they sow and then they weigh after so that they know exactly how much that they planted. And then I've known other people that it's like, we use the 11-11 gear ratio, and the shoe height has been the same for the 7 years that we've used it, and everything gets planted at this you know, same spacing, whatever, and it seems to work. So it's kind of like as nerdy and as precise as you want to get, or as like basic and just like it puts seed in the ground and we go. You can kind of do it however you want to, and the seed gets in the ground and it's not too deep or too shallow or whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's an amazing tool.
Yeah, I was really happy with like just the figuring out the different height, like the brush height or the shoe or like what roller, like besides just making those decisions, like it just works perfectly. Like there's no second guessing. Like you just roll it through, it rolls smooth every time. You can feel it. It kind of just goes with the contour of your bed. If it's a little
Mm.
bumpy, or if it's on a hill, it still just performs like you want it to. So it's really nice just having to adjust those little things because I feel pretty confident that any changes that we'll have to make is just with like the depth that we're planting at or something like that. So it definitely felt good to get all that done so quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it opens up so many possibilities for crop types. Obviously,
Mhm.
with all your like baby roots and stuff, you can really just go with it. I mean, I think we've upped our spacing on radishes from like we were doing like 5 rows on a bed, and I think now we're doing
Mhm.
6. We just realized like, hey, we've got the space and they're so quick that we can afford to stick another row in there. And if you think about
Mhm.
like how many radishes that germinate on, we typically sow those in like 50-foot sections, like half a bed.
Mhm.
And so I mean, yeah, you're increasing your production by like up to 20% just by squeezing an extra row in, and then having like the precision of that seeder, and that back wheel like flattens out right where it went, and you know exactly where you seeded. And so it's like, all right, well, from the center of that, and if we go over 2.5 inches, and then we can run right up alongside of that, it allows us to be much more precise. Where before, yeah, like in the first year that we were doing it, you're like, everything just sort of germinates up and it's sort of in a row, and you're like, was this
Mhm.
5 rows, was this 6? And you have to go back and look at your notes, and like now we know like all of our crops we have exactly dialed in. Hacker eyes get 5, beets get 4, radishes get 6, arugula gets um between 7 and 8, depending on that one particular bed, if it
Yeah,
got
yeah.
worked to the proper width. And it's a really fantastic tool, and I think I'll be curious as the season goes on to sort of hear how it changes things. Because also it allowed us to move towards like more baby green stuff, doing like
Mhm.
like a mustard mix, or we haven't really had good luck with like direct seeding salad mixes, like a mesclun mix. But obviously
Mhm.
like our arugula, our baby kale, the mustard greens and stuff like that. It's allowed us to sort of lean more into those like really quick, profitable crops that people really like, as opposed to just having to stick with 5,000 transplanted things that we have to take up all that space and all that seed starting mix. And now we can just like get it in, water it with the sumi soaker, and we're off to the races.
Yeah, I think also too with those, like, carrots is one of our, like, most profitable crops, and then radish is probably one of the lower profitable ones, but having to not worry about thinning after we
Mm.
seed and also probably having a better yield, like, even without having to thin, like, things will get spaced better, they'll get spaced more equally, we'll be able to, like, kinda predict more what's gonna be in a bed instead of, like, overseeding it just to make sure we get good germination and then having to thin or decide if you're gonna thin, and then when you don't thin, if the you probably got less yield than you would have. So I think just all those for a profitable crop and a less profitable, saving that time is they're kind of both just gonna do better, like not having to worry about thinning or just pulling out little tiny carrots because there's like four of them right next to each other. So
Yeah, and I feel like I've sort of buried the lead a little bit on it, but yeah, just like the sheer amount of time that it saves you. I
oh
mean,
yeah,
it's insane.
and our
Like so
backs.
we yeah, I mean that too. And your knees and all of that. Like so we still direct seed our peas,
Hmm.
and so we do 2 rows at 2-inch spacing on a 100-foot bed. So yeah, we're doing,
Hmm.
it's like half a pound of snap pea seed on a bed. And I mean it takes like an hour to like put
Hmm.
all those in the ground. And I'm like, man, if I would just spend the like $35 and order the roller that fits these,
Do
like I
they
could.
have one that fits the peas?
Oh yeah, I mean they have them
Okay,
that fit
those are
like
giant seeds.
everything.
Okay.
Like if you get the catalog, or if you can go to like Modern Grower. I can't remember which all ones they have at Modern Grower. Link in the description for our affiliate link, so you can get it. You can help us out a little bit on the show. Shameless plug. But yeah, I mean you can see all the different size rollers, bigger ones. Like I know it, Crystal Organic. I mean we used it to direct seed like bush beans. Like we were planting green,
Okay.
like these really big bean seeds. Yeah, it's like a really big space in the roller, and you can just, yeah, you could do same thing at like 2-3 inch spacing on a 100-foot bed. I think there we were doing three lines per bed, and yeah, I mean you can knock out a whole bed of that in, yeah, like 5 minutes. It's crazy
Yeah,
how
yeah.
how fast you can do it. And same thing, everything is going to be exact spacing. You don't have to thin. You don't have to worry about, did I push those seeds in too deep? Like
Mhm.
everything is going to be consistent. It's really great. I will say, back to sort of the shoulder season thing. obviously we're talking about like all the things that we're having to do, but one of the other like challenges is just kind of having to sort of play with Mother Nature or play off of Mother Nature and know, like you can have your crop plan. Like you can have your like we see this on February 1st every single year.
Mhm.
Like with our snap peas. But it's like, what do you do when February 1st? It's like 4 inches of snow on the ground and it's 14 degrees outside. Like obviously we're not planting peas. And and that was like one of the challenges. Like we had our first, I guess you could call it a crop failure of the years, our first planting of peas. Um, Not 100% sure. I don't know if it was just the soil was too cold or it just got overwatered because, we were watering it consistently and then we got a bunch of rain.
Mhm.
But yesterday, when I went to go do our second succession, I was like, man, this first bed is just it's not really germinating the way I thought. Like it's just really spotty. And so inevitably, like I always do, instead of just like letting things run their course, I'm like in there digging, looking
Mhm.
around, like, why is this not growing? And for
Yeah.
like a pretty substantial patch, and then kind of did it all over the bed, started realizing, yeah, like we had a bunch of seed rot in the ground. And
Mhm.
so I think based upon what I'm seeing now, that bed will probably be like 5, maybe 10% germination when it's all said and done.
Mhm.
And, it's like February 1st last year was like really nice and temperate and it was easy and stuff germinated really well. And we had a ton
Yeah.
um, and unfortunately it wasn't the case this year. And so, we obviously have our contingency plans. That crop plan is, um, like, we live and die by it in the sense of like, it's sort of the heartbeat that everything goes off of, but we also like have to learn to ebb and flow and like work around those sort of things.
Yeah, we try to plan for that this time of year. Like we have a pretty rigid schedule and like things kind of have to go in when they need to go in, but we usually leave like a 2 or 3 week like leeway time in between the next crop for the first things we plant. So like our peas, we start all those in trays and then we transplant them out. It takes a little longer, but it gives you that time. Like those are usually fine in the greenhouse if they need to hang out for another week or two. So we plan for that, and then we also plan that like when we're ready to take them out, we'll we'll push the next planting back like a week or two in the crop plan just to make sure because most things can get planted a little earlier, and then also most things can hang out or we can have a bed empty for a week if we need to. If it's always we always try to leave that around this time of year just because it's so unpredictable when things are going to be able to get planted or you're going to have to wait an extra week or two to plant. So yeah, we always plan for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we had to push. We're having to push stuff back. Sounds like you're having to definitely push stuff back.
Yeah.
Broccolis and kales and not necessarily because we can't put it in the ground, but
Hmm.
because it's like, hey, like that stuff was supposed to get transplanted this week, but it's gonna be 24 degrees Tuesday morning, and the last thing I want is this like little tiny week old broccoli plant
Hmm.
that's, spent its whole life inside a greenhouse, really moderate temperatures. It gets watered every single day, really babied. And then
Hmm.
now it's like, all right, just throw it to the wolves and have to deal with that. And so it's like, all right, well, let's just push back that an extra week. Let's push it back 2 weeks. Make sure that everything is, and like I said, I mean, the plan is to like transplant that next week, but now I'm even thinking like maybe we need to wait another week and let those soils warm back up again. Obviously,
Hmm.
3 days isn't gonna like totally change everything, but it's just having to learn, and we do this every like at any point of the year, but I feel like this time of year specifically because this is really like your first big shot at success for spring and summer and some of the
Hmm.
stuff that is in the seed house now that got started last month or early this month. I mean, it's gonna hopefully, knock on wood, hopefully it'll last us all the way until, end of August into September with something like tomatoes or peppers or eggplant. I mean, yeah, our eggplant lasted until November last year. And so it's really important that we're not just like being so regimented that we're like, well, it says that it's going to happen and by God, it has to happen. It's like
Hmm.
thinking long term and be like, all right, listen, we can afford to lose 2 weeks. And yeah, maybe we eggplant or tomatoes get to market 2 weeks late. But if it means that we have success for the rest of the summer, then I'm totally willing to kind of throw an audible at the last minute so that we can just ensure long-term success instead of just short-term follow the rules that we've set for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to make that call today. I planted our first bed of cauliflower knowing that it's gonna be pretty cold, but we usually get a couple of these cold snaps. It hits the 20s, and we'll double cover a couple things. Usually, it'll be alright for a couple days, so as long as we don't get any more snow,
Yeah, which,
usually
hey, who
usually we can
knows?
get through those cold snaps.
Yeah, and I mean, if this winter is anything moving forward like it has been, there's a good chance we might get something nuts
Yeah, who
crazy, or
knows?
we'll have more 75-degree days in February, and
Yeah.
working barefoot in shorts, and that makes it super hard because you're like, it feels like summer, even though I know it's nowhere near as hot as summer. You're like, it's here, it's time to rock and roll, let's go, and you have to like pull the reins back and be like, whoa, Nelly, like
Yeah.
and that is one of those moments, like in the opposite of that, where it's like it's so good to have your crop plan that you can base everything off of and just be like,
Mhm.
no, like we start this in 2 weeks. I think we started our tomatoes a week early, mostly just because it was like, I've got the heat mat space. Let's just go ahead and do it. The weather's looking good for the next couple weeks, so we're not gonna have to worry about like really trying to fight against nature to keep those seed trays warm. So it's like, yeah, let's go ahead and do it now. Um, but yeah, having that plan, because inevitably, I think it's just, you sort of hear the same thing with the stock market. It's like, oh yeah, buy low and sell high. It's like that's easy to say until you're in the middle of it and in the heat of the moment, your emotions start kicking in, and all of this sort of like outside input starts coming in through, oh, it's so warm, and I think we're gonna have a short winter this year, and all of this sort of
Mhm.
stuff. You want to be like reactionary and to be like, well, I can get stuff in 2 weeks early, and I can jump the gun, and
Mhm.
being able to like fall back on like, no, like this is the date that we put this in the ground, and this is like the earliest that we are planning that we can get this in the ground. And so
Yeah.
maybe we do need to wait, but the one thing we're not going to do is go any earlier, because yeah, and then like I said before, it's just not setting us up for success.
Yeah, I think that's our biggest difference between us and a lot of our friends that have greenhouses. Like, we don't s I think we start our tomatoes and peppers in March,
Dang.
and they're like, "What? They're gonna be this big when you put them in the ground." I'm like, "Yeah, because 'cause they're going outside." Like, I can't I can't have a tomato that's like they just do not do good in trays or in, like, potted up stuff in the greenhouse for months like that. They always have flowers on them by the time we're trying to put them out. So we keep pushing them back, and last year was, like, perfect. It was, like, 5 or 6 weeks before we put them in the ground, and they were just a perfect size, and we were only, like, 2 weeks behind people that had greenhouses, and it was, like,
Nice.
6 weeks less of work than we would have if we started them in February. So,
Yeah, that's perfect.
yeah, but that's also just the difference of growing outdoors versus in greenhouses, so you're definitely gonna have tomatoes way longer than we do because you
I
can
gotta hope
help
so.
prevent some of that disease and stuff.
Yeah, and I will say kind of one last thing on like the growing side before we kind of break down some numbers.
Mhm.
But call it a rookie mistake or what, but we waited way too long to do a soil test this year,
Mhm.
and in full transparency, like, it just got away from me last year. Like, I just never got around to doing one. We had a really awesome in-depth one from Logan Labs, in about this time in 2024. I don't even think we got our test until April of 24. And it showed us a lot, showed us really where we were missing a lot of stuff. And I've kind of been going based upon those recommendations for, yeah, I mean, going close to 2 years now. And I think, unfortunately, I waited until it's like stuff just doesn't quite seem to be adding up. Like peppers,
Mhm.
tomatoes, just not looking great in the tunnel. I don't know. Initially I'm like getting a lot of like blossom end rot, like, oh, it's a calcium issue. So we start supplementing with calcium and magnesium, and we're just doing our best to like help things along. And then, it's like go back to the soil test and look at it again, like, all right, well, maybe it's this, like, oh, maybe it's a phosphorus issue. Our phosphorus is kind of low. And so finally it was like, and I needed to get a soil test for our orchard just because we've been really
Mhm,
struggling in that area, and just production's been going down, down, down every year. Um, Mostly just due to some fungal issues,
mhm,
um, so I just decided like, fine, better late than never. Let's go ahead and get our soil test done. But in the meantime, I ended up doing one of the big cooperative purchases with Seven Springs.
mhm,
So we have like a $700 fertilizer order that we put together, order from the company. We're going to pick it up next week.
mhm,
And all of everything I ordered, like I have been doing for the last, year and a half, I'm going off of my soil test. Like, all right, we need to supplement more phosphorus, calcium and magnesium levels are kind of low. Obviously we need more nitrogen, potassium's looking fine. It's build disorder. And thankfully, my soil test results came back like a week early.
mhm.
And I had told my wife, I was like, "Watch, it's just gonna be my luck. I'm gonna get my soil test results back, and it's gonna be like my soils are completely opposite from
Yeah,
what I'm
yeah.
planning on." And sure enough, it's like phosphorus was super high, potassium was like okay, but it was kinda low.
Mhm,
Calcium and magnesium looked great, and some of the other like micronutrients like boron and stuff was okay. But like our biggest issue is like our pH has just dropped
mm.
dramatically. In 2 years, we went from, like, 6.4 in the field down to 6.1. So,
Oh,
like,
wow.
yeah, so, like, we're dealing with some
Huh,
moderately acidic soil in the field, and then the tunnel, obviously, the tunnel wasn't there 2 years ago, and it was on a back part of the plot that we hadn't grown anything on before. That pH was 5.8. Like, it
dang.
almost didn't even register on the graph. It was so
Uh-huh,
low, like, the soil was so acidic. And so naturally, start doing a little bit of research, and it's like, what are the effects of super acidic soil on tomatoes? And it's like, hey, look, all of our issues
mhm,
can be a result of like super acidic soils. And so, thankfully we can, address that pretty easily with like some lime
mhm,
and stuff. But I will say, like, if you go way back to like the second episode of the podcast, where I sat down with the gentleman from Logan Labs, Bill
mhm.
McKibben,
That was a good
and
one.
we kind of, yeah, and we talked about like your exchange capacity, and he described it
Mhm,
as like a cup. If you have a larger exchange capacity, it's a bigger cup, so you can
mhm,
put way more in it, but it's also a lot harder to change what's in the cup. And ours, we had a super low exchange capacity, only like 3 point something.
mhm,
And he was like, "It doesn't hold much, but it's really easy to change." And so now I can like say from my experience, like in 2 years, we like dramatically, in some ways for the better, in some ways in the worse, we really dramatically have changed our soils. And so now I'm thinking like I might actually, just to kind of stay on top of the pH issue, we might actually do another test maybe end of summer, just to kind of see where those pH levels are looking, especially in the tunnel, because tomatoes, peppers, all that sort of stuff is such a such an important crop for us, and it's going to be in the ground for so long. But yeah, just to show that like working with an agronomist, helping you understand like what all these different things on the soil test mean is really important. And thankfully, I will say this, thankfully, I got the soil test results back the morning of the deadline for that Seven Springs order. So
nice.
I like called him and I was like, "Hey, I need to completely refund that entire order and do a new one."
Mhm,
And thankfully, Eric and the other gentleman, I can't remember his name, who were there, were super awesome, and they helped me out. I think it's Matt.
mhm,
Helped me out, got it all done, so we're sitting good. But, so that's a whole 'nother thing that we're dealing with on top of, like, just general bed prep, kind of getting the farm ready to be planted in a
mhm,
much bigger way. It's like, all right, now we have to start addressing these fertility issues and continuing to try and better balance our soil, and while also trying to reincorporate our no-till practices, which we've already started doing, doing a much more shallow tillage, just to kind of work in some amendments with our broad forking and
mhm.
terminating cover crops and stuff. And so yeah, it's just, that's where we're at this time of year, where it's like for over winter, it kind of felt like it's like, man, I don't have anything to do. Like, I have projects here and there, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, now I have everything to do.
Yeah, and on top of being behind with all the crazy winter weather too. Yeah, we were definitely getting a little stressed, like, "We gotta get out there, we gotta get something done," and then all the snow comes, and then you're waiting even longer, and then you're just like we're, like, looking at the crop plan, like, "Wait, can we still do that? What do we do? Should we change anything?" And we're just like, "No, just stick to the plan, everything's always kinda movable, you can always arrange things a little differently for this time of year," so
Yeah, definitely. All right, I wanted to kind of switch gears a little bit, and we definitely don't have to get as in depth as you did on the initial time that you guys brought it up. But if you
Yeah.
guys haven't, I feel like we talk about it every time you're on. But if you
Mhm.
haven't gone back and watched the or listened to the episode that we did with Richard and Brittany initially, where we kind of broke down their numbers from 2024, and I mean that was kind of a big reason why I even reached out to you guys initially because I was just so blown away with your transparency.
Mhm.
People throw out numbers. Sometimes you hear things from people who are like those numbers are completely wrong, or maybe they're not a great representation, or they're just complete like you have no idea. You know,
Mhm.
um, a lot of times people are even cagey to like, "Hey, what was your sales today at the market?" People can get kinda and you're just kinda
Yeah.
gauge, like, "Are we doing well? What's, like, the capacity here at this market?" But your transparency with your numbers was, like, so refreshing to see that you just I mean, literally put it all out there.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and so kinda wanted to take a little bit today, and I've got my numbers too, so you guys are gonna get to hear my numbers. I'm not as in-depth as Brittany was with all of her amazing, spreadsheet skills, but yeah, so let's kinda break down a little bit. So let us know kinda how did things shake down in 2025 there at Sun and Soil Farm?
Yeah, so we, the year before, so 2024, we did 50,000, and this year, we ended up doing like, exactly the same. I think we did, like, a couple $100 over last year. Yeah, so we did, yeah, $50,216. That's our, like, gross. Our goal was 60, but we knew that was kind of a lofty goal because we 2024 went probably as good as we could have expected. And then 2025 last year was pretty similar. Like things went really well. We didn't have any major crop failures or anything like that. So I think 50,000 is probably like on a quarter acre. I'd say that's probably like give or take 10,000. That's probably about like what we can max out here. Uh, just based on the last few years of doing this. It's pretty we've got beds everywhere we can and we've got our crops picked out. So like based on these numbers that like I think it'd be difficult to we either go more towards like a monocropping system and only growing like the most profitable, or we just stick to this kind of like good variety. Profitable, the better, but we also have to have some of those less profitable things. And then as far as so yeah, it was 50,000 for the year. And then as far as what is the net profit this year was 35,000. We spent a little bit more this year. We bought a couple things that we just kind of had been putting off the last few years, like a generator in case we get a storm and we lose power and we got to walk in full of veggies. So we usually try to stick to around 10,000 for our budget for like our expenses. So this year it was 14,000 14,500. So pretty good. A couple unexpected things. We had to do like some pretty standard like maintenance on the truck, but that was just like a once every couple of year thing. So pretty much the same as the year before. We just had a little bit more expenses on just some not yearly things. I don't know if you wanted to like talk about specific crops, or is there like anything specifically that like you think people would want to know about? Because as far as like gross and then our expenses, I mean, I can break down everything like how much we spent
Yeah.
on fertilizer and whatever, like gas for the trucks or whatever. But our main focus during, like, the end of last year and our crop between our crop plan this year was, like, really focusing on the profitability, and
Yeah.
we talked about it in the last one, cutting out a couple things like sunflowers and beets, things that we did really good at, but they just did not sell very well, or, things they were just too tricky or bad germination and things like that, and So we cut out a couple of those things. That was like our main focus this year.
Just because everyone always talks on the sales side, we never
Mhm.
really talk on the expense side of things. Like, kinda what were your, like, 3 biggest expenditures on the farm?
Let's see. So we have it broken down kind of by like that. We were talking a little earlier about tax stuff, but we basically have the Schedule F form like on our spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So let's see. Supplies came out to like 6,000, but that also included the generator, which was like after everything was probably like $700. We had to buy like gas tanks and then fill those up. So like that was it's hard to like people would probably break some of these things down differently, but I would say like supplies, which is row covers, hoops, tools, the Jang, the generator,
Mhm.
stuff like that. I think that's probably most people's like biggest expense. There's just certain things that you have to replace every year, or you have to get just the things you need to like do the day to day work. But
What
besides
about, like,
supplies,
fertilizer? Because I would think, like, those consumables would probably be, like, one of the biggest
yeah,
expenses. I know it's one of our biggest expenses on the farm.
yeah, we put fertilizer and potting soil in like the same category.
Yeah.
That came out to 1,700, so like 1,700, and then that was also though we split a pallet of potting soil. So we have potting soil still for this year. We only used half of what we bought last year. So I'd say that expense is probably, you could probably take out of like two or $300 out of that. So I'd say like fertilizer and potting soil is like 15. And then all the supplies, those are like the two biggest ones. And then the next one would be like the seeds and plants for the year. All that came out to about 10,000, which is probably what you would need for like the year. Other things were things that like other farms may not need, like some of the maintenance on the truck that we had or our trailer this year.
Which, I
Uh,
mean, I think those are just kinda standard things that,
yeah.
that they're gonna come up, everything's gonna need maintenance. Because we had a similar thing, um, you know so I guess for our numbers, I have it kinda broken down. So overall, we did about 43,000 in sales.
Hmm.
And, which, I mean, for us is huge. So
Yeah, that's
we did
solid.
like 23,700, so like 23,700 in 2024,
Hmm.
and, my goal was to try and double it. I think in hindsight, without making, like, drastic changes to our operation, like, we're kind of, like, to really refine our processes like we are this year, it would have been a big challenge to try and hit those numbers,
Hmm.
but, I mean, we got pretty close, we're $700 shy of that $50,000 goal. I think and a huge part of that is just being at a really good farmer's market. I mean, there's no other
Hmm.
way around it, when you're sort of averaging $900 to $1,000 every market where, the year before we were like averaging like 500. I mean, we're literally like doubling our revenue just from the market. And
Yeah.
then also, we increased, we went from selling to one restaurant really to kind of consistently selling to two or three and then having two or three additional on top of that. And so the way it kind of broke down for us was we did like 33,300 at the farmer's market. And so
Hmm.
that's year round. So I haven't really done the maths to figure out exactly how many weeks that is. I guess actually that would give me a better idea of what we really truly averaged because that wasn't every single market. Yeah, I'd say we averaged about $800 every market. So we had some that were pretty low, and then obviously we had some that were higher. And last year we were just doing like every other Saturday through January and February. But we were the year before, we didn't actually start selling anything until April. So,
Hmm.
we had one full month of farmers market sales, and then we had 2 months. So it's basically we had 2 extra months of sales, but also we had, oh no, 3 months because our market shut down for October that first year. So yeah,
Oh yeah.
so not only did our sales increase dramatically just per market, but we also basically added 3 extra months, so roughly about 12 to 13 additional farmers markets to our kind of like our yearly catalog. And then, yeah, we did about $9,700 to restaurants, which, I mean, for us, that's really big.
Mhm.
10 grand, is it could have been a huge difference, like, I think about, like, if there was just magically, like, 10 grand not on our bottom line, like, what that would have done to the business, like, it would have made things really stressful, really
Mhm.
hard, and so, we did that, and I just kinda retooled the numbers from what we had initially talked about, moving a couple things around, but, we spent once you kinda take out some of those personal-ish expenses that are kind
Mhm.
of write-offs, we're kinda talking about that, with, like, tax stuff and write-offs and all that, we
Mhm.
spent right at about $29,000 on the farm, and
Mhm.
so that's obviously significantly more than what I wanted to spend, but the farm grew exponentially, like, we went from I think at the end of 24 going into 25, we were operating with, like, one small high tunnel, those are, like, 20 foot or it's like a 40-foot beds, and we had 4 40-foot beds in this little tunnel,
Mhm.
and then we had 30 100-foot beds, and, and so we added an additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 we added 12 more 100-foot beds,
Dang.
and then we added the tunnel as well, and so
Yeah.
that's 7 72-foot beds. So we increased our actual growing space dramatically, but also with that, we bought a tunnel, and, so there's, like, the financing costs with that, the plastic and all of the accoutrement that goes along with, like, building the doors and all that. We had to replace the plastic on another tunnel, and, more beds means more fertilizer, more seed costs.
Mhm.
We're driving a little bit further to get to our markets. We upgraded our packaging. We're doing more stuff with, like, clamshells and bags, and we had to kind of upgrade everything just as the market required us to have more stuff, more space, and unfortunately, yeah, like, we had truck maintenance, blew
Mhm.
his hydraulic cylinder on the tractor. That was
Mhm.
like, when it was all said and done, that was like $700, and
Oof.
so there was a lot of added expense in that, but yeah, definitely our biggest expense. I had it all queued up, and then QuickBooks kicked me out right while we were talking, so I have to, like, reload all of that sort of stuff. But, yeah, I mean, we spent, like, $1,500 in seed, which I think we've already like, and that was over the entire season, and I think we're, like, close to hitting that number already for the year. Now we're trying to buy more upfront, take advantage of, like, more free shipping discounts and stuff like that, but, so
Who's doing
we
free
increase
shipping? Johnny's isn't doing free shipping, is it?
if you spend $200 or more,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
get free shipping.
We're always trying to
Um,
get other discounts from them, but
yeah, yeah.
they don't do a lot of discounts on.
No, no, it's unfortunately. But yeah, and so, we increased, so, like, everything went up. So our
Mhm.
sales really close to doubling, but also our expenses. I don't have our expenses from 24, but
Mhm.
24, we really were bootstrapping it. I mean, we were doing the bare minimum we need to do just to, like, make it to market.
Mhm.
And, we, like, and then last year we reincorporated the tractor. We added the tunnel, obviously we, like, upgraded seed starting mix, all of these different things that we did, so we didn't really net a ton of money. Yeah, like, we maybe brought home, what is it, like, 14,000? And so, when it's all said and done, like, the farm is making money. I'm able to pay myself,
Mhm.
and, we're able to live off of it, and I can afford to be full-time once you add in, like, my wife's income and picking up side work, and
Mhm.
because, one thing that's not reflected in this is the fact that, I worked 3.5 months at the other farm last year too. So it wasn't,
Mhm.
so, like, there was additional income. So it's like, it's not me saying that, like, we lived, I survived on $13,000,
Mhm.
and, like, a family of four
Yeah.
on $13,000. Like,
Yeah,
obviously there's a
yeah.
lot of other things in there. Then you include, like, tax returns and all that sort of stuff. But
Mm. But at this
but it
point, I
was
mean, that's you're at the spot now where, like, you have, like, your proof of concept now. So now, like, at this stage for me and Brittany now, when we were at your stage, now we're like, "All right, how do we finish getting everything, all the infrastructure we need so we don't have these big purchases anymore.
Mhm,
And
yeah.
then how do we cut down on labor? How do we get these systems in place so that like even if you're making the same amount of money, you're spending either less time or you already have the things in place so you're not scrambling around, buying things just when you need them instead of waiting for like a good price on something used. So I think you're in a good spot. Like if you're making 40, $50,000 on a small farm like that, I think as long as you're working towards cutting out a lot of expenses and getting the labor down, like it just gets you just nail those things down a little bit every year. And it just at this point, our big focus was like cutting down on labor and really tracking that and making sure that like even if we're making less, if we're spending less time, that like feels good for us too.
And that's the other thing, like, out of that 29,000, $7,500 of that was labor cost.
Mhm.
And we're going at it. We're gonna go at it alone this year, basically just me, and so so theoretically, that'll save me $7,500,
Mhm.
but obviously when we brought someone on last year and it helped for sure, and it just kept me sane more than anything, not being out here
Mhm.
all day by myself, but it's like that it's definitely like we didn't budget for that. Like we didn't
Mhm.
really budget for can we afford to pay someone, a decent wage to work a couple days a week for, the 6 or like the 7 months, 7.5 months that they were here, and so, but like looking back, like through our expenses, like I can definitely see areas where not even just like cutting back expenses, but like increasing our ability to produce, not having as much poor germination, not having as much crop loss, you know,
Mhm.
dealing with things like poor soil fertility and soil pH that hopefully, we can, I feel like we're still at that point where like you were saying, you feel like you sort of like maxed out, sort of hit a ceiling somewhat of like
Mhm.
what you can do on your property. Obviously, I still have room to grow. Like there's more space that I can do. Now, can I effectively do that as one person? Probably not. We're not
Mhm.
really going to grow any more this year. Um, because why get bigger when I'm still super sloppy and I have a lot more stuff to accomplish kind of
Mhm.
within the space that I have before we start opening up new beds. Or if I do that, it would be like we're opening up new beds so that we can put other beds into cover crop and rest them and,
Mhm.
kind of extending those rotations. But, you know, I still feel like we have, because when it's all said and done, we'll be on about 3/4 of an acre. So I'm theoretically like 3 times the size of your farm.
Mhm.
And so I still feel like we have plenty of room to grow the revenue side of things too. And so, if we're simultaneously like trying to like increase sales while decreasing expenses, yeah, like
Mhm.
I don't have to buy, God forbid, hopefully I don't have to buy 2 greenhouse plastics next year.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
We've got 3 tunnels now, or 2 tunnels in a seed house that all have 1 to 2 year old plastic on it, and
Mhm.
maybe one, and so hopefully that'll last us a few years as long as nothing crazy happens and the tractor's in good shape, and
Mhm.
we just dropped a ton of money on fertilizer and seed and all
Mhm.
that. But if we can get things dialed in really well and be more precise with what we're growing and really operating off of a crop plan now instead of just sort of like flying by the seat of our pants,
Yeah,
then
yeah.
yeah, I'll be really curious to see what this conversation looks like February of next year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, we've, like, definitely, we talked before we did the podcast today about, I just finished reading the Ben Hartman's The Lean Farm,
Yeah.
uh, and I mean, yeah, without knowing much about that before we read it, if you told me and Bernie to write a book about how we run our farm, we'd basically write that book just without the, like, Japanese influence of it, but we've really been, like, we need to order the right amount of seed and not be overspending on seed, not be starting things that we end up not even getting in the ground, saving on potting soil like that. And like just all those little things add up so quick once you've gotten like a couple years in and you got all your major infrastructure in, like nailing down those things, like making sure you're not wasting any seed or wasting fertilizer or wasting time even, and just not buying tools that you didn't need that just sit around. So I think just really I don't know, I just think you're in a good spot now. Just you just really gotta just try to get some of that data with like, have you been tracking any of like the like yields out of a bed and then figuring out like bed foot, like how much money something's making out of a bed? Have you
Yeah.
been able to try to figure that
Yeah,
out?
I did some of that kind of during, like, the main growing season last year. Obviously, I don't
Mhm.
have any of that in front of me to, like, know off to, like, recall off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm definitely gonna be far more intentional with that. Like, we've already kind of started a plan, even, for something kind of totally unrelated to the veg side, but, like, with our pear trees, you know
Mhm.
yeah, like, I've already invested a lot of time and money into those trees to, like, get, like, an OMRI approved, copper fungicide to kind of deal with our fungal issues. As much as I
Mhm.
don't wanna spray, it's just, like, we're at the point now where it's, like, if I don't, we're gonna lose the trees, and so, like, I've spent hours and hours and hours pruning the trees, shaping them up, cutting
Mhm.
off the infected. I mean, the whole trees are infected, there's nothing I can do about that, but, the
Mhm.
stuff that's, like, definitely dead, fertilizing, kind of putting in sort of like a fertigation system for those trees
Mhm.
and all of that. And so, but our plan this year, like we've already started the process of like, labeling all the trees, having like a sheet so that we know like, all right, these like tree number 6 yielded this many pounds of fruit,
Mhm.
and it's going to take a little bit more time, but it's just as simple as, you know, harvest everything off of that tree and make a note in my phone, like tree 6, and I have the scale out there with me. It's not going to take that much more time. But just to kind of get an idea on like, because we're doing a little bit of A/B comparison with that, like we're gonna have some that are gonna be like super hard pruned, some that are kind of getting shaped up, some that we're just kind of gonna leave.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of more on the experimental side, but yeah, now that I feel like we've kind of got our processes down and like way back to the beginning of the conversation of like, all right, we've nailed down, we're doing like 6 rows of radishes per bed.
Mhm.
We're doing, we're gonna change our tomato spacing. We're gonna do all of our tomatoes kind of trellising them up with lower and lean as opposed to doing some with the Florida weave. And
Mhm.
so in some ways it's been a struggle to like dial in those like what is my actual like price per bed foot for a particular crop because
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
still learning like what are our processes going to be like are we going to do field tomatoes like do is it valuable to like really dial in like what is my pound per, square foot for field tomatoes if it's like we haven't even had a successful one yet. So, um, but I think this year, like I feel more confident now where 26 is going than I've felt,
Mhm.
the 2 previous years, which God, I would freaking hope so. I'd
Yeah,
hope that
yeah.
I feel like I have a better head on my shoulders for what we're doing now that I've, done 2 full seasons and we're coming into our 3rd. We
Mhm.
made enough money that we were able to set some money aside so that we're not like scrambling and putting stuff on credit cards or putting things off, like putting off expenses because we don't have the money right now.
Mhm.
Um, like we're just like, all right, let's go ahead and do the giant fertilizer order. Let's go ahead and do the big seed order. Let's just get it done, and
Mhm.
like slaved over both of those things for days of like just going through the website, like, do I need this? Do I need that? Let's double check it. Let like triple check, quadruple check that seed order, make sure that we're not wasting any money on dumb stuff. Like I've got like a whole box of I call it like my dumb seed, which is
Oh,
just
yeah.
like, why did I order this random, lettuce variety that it's like I have no intention on ever growing that. Like it's a full size romaine head. Like why? Like
Mhm.
I don't have the space or the time to justify, growing that out. And or just different things like, why did I get this one crazy weird pepper? Like, no one bought it. It didn't grow particularly well for us. Like, let's just focus on what's going to work really well. And so I'm hoping that kind of the combination of just more experience, better systems in place, knowing what we can expect financially, that we're like we've postured ourselves to be able to succeed far more this year than we have in the past. I'm curious with you, just to kinda go back, you were kinda saying, like, your goal was 60 and you hit 50. Do you feel like there off the top of your head, can you think of some things that are like, "All right, well, if we change X, Y, and Z, like, maybe it will position us, and obviously, some of it's Mother Nature and you can't predict that, but I mean,
Yeah.
are there things that you can even see now, like several more years down the road than even I am, that you can see where you can kind of squeeze out that extra, 10,000 in revenue for this
Well,
year?
yeah, I think we're kind of leaning towards where you're leaning with the fruit. We've always done some fruit. We've always had some blueberries and figs that we take to the market more as like a side thing, but it was like stuff that we were growing for ourselves. But most years it's just like kind of a crazy amount of figs every once in a while. So we sell those. And so we have cleared some space and we are adding some pretty ordered a bunch of fruit trees and I think some more blueberries. We're gonna do more figs and we have all that like kind of along the tree line, but we've been working on clearing that and we're getting like an electric fence put up around that to get all that going and hopefully I think little things like that. Uh just I mean, we don't really we've been pretty comfortable making what we've made the last couple years. So we're
Mhm.
thinking just little things like that will just keep, fruit always sells. We never take home anything like
Oh, yeah,
blueberries or
fruit
figs or any, they
fruit
just
is
fly off the
insane.
table.
Everyone goes crazy for fruit, and, we're
Yeah.
always trying to think of, like, how can we add more without killing ourselves?
Yeah. And in the future too, like, I mean, if we have like a pretty good retirement plan, we've been saving money for that. That's been a goal of ours for a long time. So we're thinking kind of more into the future so that like
Mhm.
we can taper off and still go to the market maybe and have more fruit and maybe not be planting and harvesting carrots as much as we are right now. And, this is a pretty physical, demanding job. So we're kind of thinking like that in the future. And then, just things like really just sticking to the data and, like, doubling down on, like, the peppers, like, peppers are a big
Mhm.
one for us. We're doing more peppers this year and taking out just a couple of those beds, like, when you break down that per bed foot, the profitability like that, it is very easy to make a decision to, like, add a bed of peppers that's gonna make you 3 times what a bed of beets would have made you. So, I think just little things like that, even last year was great, but there's still, like, little things like that that are working on changing for this year, so, I think it's just crop selection and just knowing your market and having and using that data every year. We're always changing stuff. Some stuff is popular for a year or 2, and then it kinda drops off, and we're doing we're always kinda tweaking that kinda stuff, and there's really no way to know until you bring it to the market, so one depressing thing, I was trying to find it earlier, but Brittany she had some data I was trying to find earlier about so we know what we bring to the market, and then we also keep track of what we take home.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Brittany found I couldn't find it on here earlier, but I think we probably would have done close to 60,000 if we sold out every single market. So,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
it's just kind of like a seasonality thing or a weather thing, like, if there's we this year we got pretty lucky, there's only, like, a couple markets that were, like, a downpour. People still show up, but, like, it could take 1 year where you get 5, 6, 7 rains during a Saturday market, and, I mean, that's, like, a couple $1,000 out of the year that's just gone because you only sold half of what you brought because it was terrible weather, so but, we keep track of what we bring home, and that was like, "Oh my gosh," like, our market is great, but, like, if we sold out every single week, like, I think we would've gotten close to 60,000, but I just don't know if there's any way to not I mean, you don't want to sell out too early because you don't wanna, like, leave money on the table, but you also don't wanna have too much left over at the market that, like, it's depressing to, like, all that work that you took to grow all that stuff and you take some home, like, we preserve almost everything we take home, but it kinda would be nice to sell all that, so
Yeah, no, for sure, and I think, like, the piece of advice that I got was, you wanna take home 10% of what you bring,
yeah.
and then at that
I
point,
think
you
that's
kinda
about what
know.
we did.
Yeah, you then that means you kinda know, like, you did the best you could,
Mhm,
which, I mean, you just think you're like, "Oh, yeah, 10%, like, that's reasonable." Then you think about it, like, that's 10% more that we could have made, at the
mhm.
end of the year, and, yeah, I mean, that's always the hard part of, like, do you take enough? Do you not take enough? And, and it's easy to just be like, well, just grow more, grow
Yeah, yeah.
more of the thing that sells out in the first hour. And it's
Mhm,
like, I mean, yeah, but you sometimes you reach a point where, like, I know we've had particular crops that, when we bring 20 of them, they sell really well. They sell in like the first hour. I don't know. Trying to think of an example. Like fennel has been one where like the
mhm,
first, like our hardcore customers that come in the morning, they all, like we have the same people, they buy like two bulbs of fennel every single week that we have it. They love
dang.
it, and then it's like, but then once you get to that second half and the customers change and it's kind of it's not your hardcore people. It's kind of more of the people that are just sort of there to visit and they see and,
Mhm,
and they're going to buy the arugula, they're going to buy the lettuce, so on and so forth. And so it's like, all right, well, if we can sell 20 heads of fennel, well, but if we can grow 40 every week, then like, yeah, like let's just increase that. And you quickly start to realize like, well, 40 is probably not the cap that we can hit. It's probably closer to like 25 or 30.
mhm,
Um, and so, I mean, but then again, then you have some weeks where you're like, wow, like right before like the first big freeze that we had, we harvested everything, big, small, everything. We just
mhm,
bunched up the smaller ones together. Yeah, I think we had like 45 of them and we sold all of them, and so
mhm.
it's just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
so sometimes it's just like a crazy weird week sort of thing, but yeah, trying to find that balance of like, it in some ways it almost gets to the point where you're like trying to like squeeze blood out of a turnip, you're just like trying to get every last little drop that you can out of something. And I think that's a benefit of like having secondary or tertiary like market streams. Like
Mhm,
if you can't sell it at the market, maybe you can move it to your CSA customers Monday, Tuesday, whenever they pick up. It's usually still perfectly good by then.
mhm.
And then if you can't sell it then, maybe you've got a wholesale customer that doesn't buy a lot, but you can at least move. Yeah, if you just have a week where like nobody bought kale this week, it's like, well, we can call up such and such food hub and they'll take the 20, 30 bunches of kale, and then
Yeah.
so then it's like you can still hit that like you take home 10% that you bring so that that you've like fully exhausted your farmer's market, but then you also like have your little avenues for that 5-10% here and there and like slowly eke out. Like that's one of our goals for this year is like obviously we want to increase sales across the board, but it will not be difficult for us to get that restaurant number up.
Mhm,
I'd like for it to be closer to like, because right now we're right at about a third. So I'd like for it to be closer to like 40% of our overall sales. And so
dang.
that's not going to add a ton, but it might add $2,000 or whatever. But it's like, but at the end of the year, like, it all starts to add up, and realistically, knowing the things that we're going to be growing, I think we may have talked about this before, but I kind of fell into the trap of like I grew some stuff because restaurants told me they wanted it, and then they
Mhm,
never would buy it, and
mhm,
so we moved back to the like, nope, we're like, I know what's gonna sell really well. Like, I know what's
mhm,
gonna sell really well at the market, and the chefs will buy it, and it's gonna be like a standard bush bean. It's not gonna be this fancy French filet bean that doesn't produce as well and doesn't produce as long. Um, it's like, but I know they'll still buy it. Like
mhm,
and so it's like, let's grow as much as we think we can like effectively pick and sell at the market. And then if we have extra, then, hopefully they'll buy it, as opposed to where it was like, we'll grow a bunch of this and what the chefs don't buy we'll take to the market, and then the chefs didn't buy any of it, and then it didn't produce as well, so we were limited on what we could sell at the market. So it was kind of like, in a lot of ways last year we were like working against ourselves trying to just like please multiple streams, and
yeah.
now it's just like, nope, I think we're kind of figuring out what sells really well when, and now we've been at the market for a year. We know what people have and what they don't have and where the gaps are. And,
Mhm.
and so, yeah, I think there's plenty, for us, this is only year 3. Like we have plenty of room to grow
Oh, yeah.
um, and I'm just, yeah, I mean, at this point, it's like, if all of our processes work out really well, and soil does what it does when you take care of it really well, then hopefully everything will be really good, and we just hope that there's no any, like, crazy freak weather or, um, yeah, cancel farmers markets or whatever, but it is what it is at the end of the day. We're farmers,
Yeah.
and you gotta deal with the weather.
Yeah, right. Yeah. We always I mean, you were kind of talking about that earlier with like starting seeds this early and like that whenever you start putting stuff outside, like it just always every time I plant a bed, I'm always like, this is just I'm just gonna leave this outside and just
Yeah.
hope for the best. Like
And
you never know
I'm
when that
gonna yeah, I'm
weather's gonna
gonna
come
go
around.
outside, go in the house and sleep in my warm bed, and it's just gonna be out there
Yeah.
and,
I spent the
something.
last month or two taking care of all this stuff and I'm just gonna leave it outside.
Yeah, and hope for the best and hope it doesn't freeze or hope it
Mhm.
doesn't bolt or whatever, and,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
it's
the worst part about we got a new weather station last year and it's amazing, but then you wake up in the morning and it says 36 and you're like, "Oh, good, I'm glad I didn't cover stuff." And then you go outside and you're like, "Why is there frost on the grass right now?" Like, it's just so hard to, like, predict some of those things, so I
yeah.
think that's where kinda, like, we're now, like, getting to the point where, like, we kinda have some of that instinct that we never thought we would have, like, be it like you look at the weather app and you're like, "No, I know we need to cover stuff," or like, it's a certain temperature outside, you look at the weather app, it says it's gonna be this temperature at night, and you're like, "No, it's way too cloudy, it's things are gonna be insulated, it's not gonna get that cold," and so we're constantly just trying to, like, get better at, like, trusting our instincts after, like, 5, 6 years of, like, knowing all those, screwed what do they call it? I don't watch a lot of baseball. Curveball. The
Yeah, there
weather's
you go.
always gonna throw you that curveball, but, like, now we're getting better at, like, trusting our instinct and, like, really just, like, trust the process, trust that data that you have, and then you just gotta kinda go day by day and make those decisions on the fly.
Yeah, and I think on kind of the flip side of that is, like, also investing in like, the proper protection and, like, the proper infrastructure if it
Mhm,
does go south, like, we that was,
mhm.
one of the big expenses, like, we basically, like, doubled our row cover and hoop, you know, inventory,
Oh, yeah, that
and,
was another big expense for us last year too, we got a bunch of stuff
yeah,
that came.
yeah, and that really came in handy, not because I had an exorbitant amount more stuff outside than I did last year. We had a little bit more stuff than we did outside last year.
Mhm,
Um, but when it came to, yeah, like the snow and the ice and all that sort of stuff, one of the struggles was is like we didn't have enough hoops to space
mhm.
them out enough to like really keep row
Oh,
cover
yeah.
nice and tight over top of everything. So when it snowed, it weighed everything down, it snapped hoops, it ripped covers, it froze stuff
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
ground. And so like that was, there were certain crops that were like, this is pretty much done. And there's not really, if it dies, it dies. I'm like, it's like the last, maybe there's like 5 more bunches of Hackerite turnips in this bed, and they're kinda
Mhm,
like not great this time of year anyways. And so, it's like, let's take all the hoops off of those beds. It's like, and then every bed that was still had like a good pickable crop got like doubled up on the hoops so
mhm.
that when, yeah, when we got a half inch of ice or whatever it was like nice and taut, everything was good.
Nice.
We braced, we added more bracing to the greenhouse this year, reinforced the doors, all of the stuff that we did, not, you know, because, 90% of the time it's not going to be needed, but we do it. And then, and then we had no problems and we had no issues. And so,
Mhm,
yeah, so it's like that combination, like that's the weird part about this. And maybe it's every business. I haven't, this has definitely been by far the most successful of the businesses that I've been a part of.
mhm.
And I've tried to start. Most of them barely ever get off the ground, but, um, but it's like, it's this combination of like learning to trust your instincts while also investing in like worst case scenarios at the same time,
Mhm,
so it's like you're kind of hedging your bets while also trusting your gut. And in some ways it almost seems like diametrically opposed to each other, but I think really you're more just kind of like tackling the same thing from different angles of like, we're trying to get to the end goal here of like stuff survives, stuff is healthy, and, and it's like, yeah, I think it'll be fine, but
Mhm.
I'll give you an example, like, going back to, now our barn is insulated, like, we invested in, like, finishing out the barn, so we can, it can stay good 20, 30 degrees above whatever the outside temperature is,
Mhm.
because it's well insulated, and so now, instead of, like, freaking out if we're gonna get a cold snap and, like, cover the peppers and the tomatoes and put heat lamps and do everything you can in the seed house, like, I
Mhm.
can just take them and bring them in here, you
Mhm.
know? And so it's like, if it's gonna be 30 degrees outside, everything will probably be fine in the tunnel, but it's like, it's gonna take me half an hour. Just move it inside
Mhm.
and we know we're good. And so it's like, it's kinda trust your gut, but it's like, you have situations and scenarios in place to where it's like, if you do need to, like, make a judgment call at the last minute, you're not, like, scrambling to be like, "Load them up in the truck and drive them to the house and, the kitchen table is just full of tomato starts," or whatever. We're a little bit more set up for success in that way.
Yeah, we've been there.
Yeah, for
Bringing stuff
sure.
into our spare bedroom and loading it up in there. Yeah,
Well, Richard, I think we've pretty much covered the main stuff that I wanted to talk about. Yeah,
yeah.
I feel I was excited about this year. It really felt like our first year of feeling prepared and ready to go. And
Mhm.
now that it's like the days are getting longer, stuff's starting to warm up, stuff's getting planted outside again. We have 2 more winter markets, and then we're back to, like, our regular season market, which won't really feel that much different at the end of the day, but it's
Mhm.
just like the seasons are changing, the year is, like, coming back, and it's just that feeling of anticipation, and, I'm really, really looking forward to '26, and in spite of wars and rumors of wars and chaos in the world and whose emails got leaked or whatever, in spite of all the nonsense going on, I'm feeling really hopeful about this year, and I hope you are too.
Yeah, 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 we feel good. We especially with our, like this was our first, like, real hardcore, like, full stop to the year and taking the winter off, and, yeah, we just feel really refreshed, and we're definitely itching to get back out there, and felt good to be planting stuff, and, yeah, every year just gets especially keeping up with all that stuff all along the winter and not worrying about trying to keep stuff covered. We definitely feel more prepared with, like, all the infrastructure and a lot of, like, the stupid little things that we're scrambling around doing stuff in the spring usually is already done and we're ready. So, yeah, I think especially like you were saying you already got all your fertilizer and stuff, that's usually a big weight off of my shoulders is to just spend the money in the beginning. We usually save some money for the beginning of spring. We have everything we need to get going. So I'm not worried about like, am I going to run out of this in May when I'm ready to plant all of our tomatoes and peppers? So yeah, I think just take the next couple weeks and like really try to like just really knock out a lot of that like little stuff that you won't have time for in like April and May. But yeah,
Yeah.
we're ready. We're excited for now we're really gonna try for 60 this year.
Yeah,
We think
awesome, and
yeah,
we're
we think
gonna
we've
we're
got
gonna hit
some
it.
stuff dialed in that we can get a little closer to that this year.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Alright, well, that one's in the bag. I think this is definitely probably our longest farm vlog episode, but,
Oh, really?
we had a lot to cover. It's been a minute since we talked, so we had a lot to cover.
Yeah.
But, huge thank you to Diego and the whole team over at Modern Grower for making the show possible. We wouldn't be sitting here blabbering on about money and fertilizer and cold winters if it wasn't for all the work that Modern Grower does. And if you need tools like the Jang seeder that is changing Richard's life, or the paper pot transplanter, or the Sumi soaker, row cover, landscape fabric, microgreen seed trays, all of the amazing things that I use on my farm, and we're gonna get Richard using real soon. I know for sure. I think the Jang is just the gateway drug to sexy farm tools. But if
Yeah.
you need all of that stuff and much more, you can go over to shop.moderngrower.co, or you can click on our affiliate link in the description. And when you make a purchase through there, we get a little bit of a kickback, and it helps make the show possible. And you too can become a modern grower. I know that's not their tagline, but I'm going to start using that because I really like it. And a reminder that we believe in value for value, like I said at the top of the show. So if you are getting any value out of this, please consider kicking back some of that value our way. You can go to Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, look for Crop Culture Farm or at Crop Culture Farm, and you can send us $1, send us $5, send us $100. And if you want, you can throw in a message or a question, and Richard and I, or me and another guest, would be happy to answer that question on the show. But until next time, he's been Richard, I've been Alec, and you've been listening to the Rookie Farmer Podcast. Blessings and peace.